How could it possibly take somebody 20 years to write a book that's only about 200 pages long? I'm going to explain today. The book is BUMWIPER. It is 18 years working with people with disabilities, and it's my story. So let's talk about that today. We'll dive right in and see what happens. Welcome to Mark My Words. Mark My Words is the story of my journey from a place where I was shattered to where I could live again. So about 20 years ago, I was working with people with disabilities and I had just started writing. And I went to a class and the teacher asked us to write an interesting story about something that happened in our daily life. Well, I wrote one of the stories which would eventually find its way into my book. The entire class was somewhat stunned by what I had written. I was talking about just a normal day for me, working with violent people that happen to have disabilities. And my normal was seen as extraordinary by the people that I wrote the story to, that I read the story to. So I decided to sit down and write a book. And it was about my years at that time. It was about 16 years working with people with disability. Some of the interesting stories, some of the fun stories. The book is chock full of them. If you decide to have a read, you'll get a very intimate, personal understanding of the kind of work that I did. And it's not all flattering. I made mistakes. I did things that led to dangerous situations inadvertently. But it's just no holds barred. It just tells my story of the time. And it was filled with stories like the one story I'll tell you just really quickly. A little girl came home from school one day to the unit that I was working in, and she had blood all down her legs. And I freaked out. I was like, she's hurt. Something's gone wrong. I was 19 at the time, barely. My mum and my daughter had basically hidden their monthly cycles so well that to this day, I'm pretty much convinced that my sister has never had a period. There was never any evidence around. There was never any pads. There was never any boxes. There was never nothing. It was like the big secret. And when I was in high school, primary school, we all came back from lunch one time and the teacher said, every boy in the class, go outside and walk around the oval 5 times. Basically, a girl had gotten her period, very, very young at the time, and they were giving the girls a health class, but they didn't tell us what had happened. So I grew up believing that a woman's monthly cycle was a mysterious thing that kind of happened and nobody ever spoke about. So here I am, girl's got blood bleeding down her legs. She's 12, 13, something like that. Intellectual disability. And at the time, it was seen that men should do everything that women would do. Later on in my career, I would never have done this, or I would have done everything I could to avoid it. But so they said, Mark, go and clean her up, stick a pad on her, and she'll be fine. So took her into the bathroom, asked her to undress, asked her to have a shower. I stood in the doorway, just directing, make sure you get all the blood, not touching, not going anywhere close. She finishes. She's got a towel wrapped around herself. I ask her to put her top clothes on. She's got like a t-shirt or something on. And then I'm like, okay, so it's just a period, which I'm only finding out is a real thing. I've then got this box of pads. Now, when I used to tell this story to audiences, women would laugh, men would stay strangely silent, because for a man, just about everything I'm about to say kind of makes sense. It's kind of like, okay, yeah, I can see where the problem would be. Women, it's hysterical. I'm looking at the girl. I'm looking at the pads. I pulled one out of the box and I'm confused. I'm lost. And I've always said that in my job, there was never a dumb question. No question is a dumb question. If you've got a question, ask it. If you don't know something, better to just make sure. So, no such thing as a dumb question, unless your question is when you walk out to a group of women sitting at two tables, maybe 15 adult staff member women, and you say, okay, I've got a pad. How does it go on? Hysterical laughing. Mark, you've got to take it out of you've got to open the little packet. So, okay, perhaps should have worked that out. Go back to the little girl. She's still sitting on the bed patiently. She's covered with a towel, got a t-shirt on, so it's all appropriate. And so I've got this pad, I've taken it out, and I can see that there's a sticky side. Does the sticky side stick to her or does it stick to the underpants? And in fact, I didn't even make it as far as thinking perhaps it would stick to the underpants. It was like, I thought maybe it was like a band aid. Thought I'd better ask the question. So basically walked out, said, okay, another question. Do I stick the pad to the girl or do I stick it somewhere else? Uh, of course, gales of laughter. No, of course, you stick it in her underpants. Now, so many things wrong with that story now that I tell it. I can laugh at certain parts of the situation. But when I look back on that whole day, I don't feel joy. I don't feel humor. It just basically makes me feel sad. While certain elements of the story, yes, are quite funny, overall, there's so many problems with this story. First of all, why as a man was I doing this to help a young woman? Not much younger than me. Nowadays, that would never happen. And I mean, I've been in situations where, you've got to help somebody in a very, very intimate situation. And I learned very on in my career that it doesn't matter what happens, doesn't matter what you do. All that matters is how it looks. All this is a long way to explain. This book took 20 years to write because a little while into the writing of it, I was the victim of an assault in the workplace. A client came after me with a knife. It was really, really bad. I've spoken about it multiple times. If you want to hear the story, just go into the back catalogue. It's all there. That event was what one psychiatrist called the straw that broke the camel's back. I'd been through so much trauma, so many assaults throughout my career that my mental health was on I don't know, was on a knife edge. Pardon the pun. I was broken. And as psychologists once said to me that they think that I had PTSD for about 5 years before this incident. When I was hurt, I then a couple of years later tried to come back to my writing because I was so hurt I couldn't write. But this was a book that I could not reread because each story I told with that kind of humorous light to it. I tried to make it funny and interesting and wow. And I tried to make myself out as this kind of like Han Solo, cool, calm, unaffected type. Something violent would happen and I would just flip the bartender a coin and go, it's all good. And that's who I thought I was until my mind broke. And when I started to reread some of the stories in this book, there was no a psychologist sat me down once and said, "Tell me a story about your job." And I told her the story about in my first week. I was assaulted by a client, police came, and I tried to make it funny. I finished the story and went, "There you go." And she said, "You understand that that story is not funny." And I was kind of like, well, I didn't see the humor in it at that time. She said, "Mark, you were assaulted. You were violently assaulted. And then the people that were supposed to help you treated you very, very badly." Again, it's a story about me dealing with cops. You can go into the Mark My Words catalog, it's in there. Just look, Mark My Words, cops. You'll see the story. You see, all the things that I'd written in my book that were I intended to be humorous actually weren't in the light of my mental illness. In my first book, I start with a kind of poem, and it talks about how mental illness doesn't just take away your todays, because you don't have a today, because all you can feel is pain. It doesn't just take away your tomorrows. You don't have a tomorrow. There is no hope. But it also destroys your past. Everything that you've ever done is now seen through this lens of pain and sadness and sorrow and remorse and regret and anger. So even your past is transformed into something horrible. One of my children asked me a couple of months ago, "Dad, what's your favorite memory of working with people with disabilities?" And I could not think of a positive memory. There were times where positive things happen. And there were instances where I can remember vividly me smiling and laughing, but I have no feeling about them. It's like I've watched a film and it hasn't engaged me. I'm like, yeah, I can see. You see, mental illness took my entire career and it made it something that I hate. This book, BUMWIPER, took 20 years to write because it was 15 years before I could sit down and actually read the stories without recoiling and having panic attacks, bringing on the worst symptoms of my mental illness. Even now, when you write a book, there's a lot of editing. You have to go back and you have to change things and you have to redo stuff. This was a painful book to do that. I found it incredibly hard to do that because I was so angry at the different things that happen. I've used this analogy a little bit. I'll use it again today. Mental illness or mental health is like enamel in your teeth. The enamel, if you look after it, will last forever. If you brush teeth, if you go to the dentist, your teeth will last you your whole life and you'll do good. But if you don't take care of them, if you eat sugary treats, if you don't brush your teeth, if you don't floss, if you don't do even just general dental health care, you're in for a world of hurt. And that's what happened with my mental health. Every incident that I was going through, and this is a book filled with incredible violence. I didn't know, but somebody told me the other day they were reading it while they were eating a meal and they had to put the meal away because they were just so confronted by what I was writing. There's a book full of violence. There's a book full of trauma and distress. But it's also a book about what people in that industry should not do. I want it to be a signpost for people that are in the care industry in whatever capacity, whether you're caring for somebody that you love, whether you're a disability carer, whether you're a nurse, whatever you are. I want people to realize that their first duty of care is to themselves. And we talked about that a lot when I was working with people with disability. The duty of care. I have a duty of care. I have to make sure that the people under my protection are safe and looked after. The thing is, the first duty of care is to yourself. Because if you can't care for yourself, who's going to care for the people around you? If you go down, there's nobody else to look after the people that you're looking after. Yet I didn't see it like that. I always saw my duty of care as being to the person that I was looking after, ensuring that they felt safe, that they were safe, that they were protected, even while they were assaulting me or other people. This is a book that I hope you'll read. It is a book that was hard to write, hard to finish, desperately hard to finish. And yet, I hope that above all else, it's a book of hope. Because the fact of the matter is that there is life after mental illness, and I'm living proof of that. Whatever symptoms you've been through that you think nobody can understand, I've been there. I am a suicide survivor. I've lost hope. I've given up on hope. I've been hopeless more times than I can count. Even this last week has been desperately hard for me. Just because my mind is broken. But life prevails. Life goes on. Life continues. If you know somebody that is a carer in any way, shape, or form, whether they work with people with disability or whatever, please ask them to have a look at this book. You can get it on Amazon. I've got a couple of copies here. If you want a signed copy, you can DM me. I can arrange for that to happen. The book is BUMWIPER. 18 years working with people with disabilities. It is honest. It is brutal. It is shocking in places. But ultimately, I hope that it is a book of hope. It is a book of understanding that you don't need to do your journey the way that I did it, not caring about myself, not looking after myself, not making sure that I was okay. And there's a number of reasons for that, and they're all in the book. BUMWIPER, 18 years working with people with disabilities. It's out now. I'll leave all the links below. That's going to do it for this week. Have a great week. I look forward to speaking to you next week. I'll be here. I hope you will too. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to Mark My Words. I'd like to thank my producer, Meredith Brosnan, and also Torian, Kevin, and Lorraine. And I can't forget the band Adelaide, who allows us to use their song as our theme.